can't look myself in the mirror, how am I going to journal on here and talk about my feelings? And if I need to cry it out, cry it out. And how am I going to be transparent, hold myself accountable, and talk to you if I can't even, be transparent with myself?
Welcome to the show, Alundas. Thanks for coming on today.
Thank you, Lisa. It's an honor.
No problem. So, tell me a little bit about yourself and who you are, what you're all about.
Absolutely. So, a little about me. I'm from Fresno, California, originally. So, the middle of California, nothing really much going there. My parents were young when they had me, 1921. So, they were in that parting phase. So, I seen a lot of things. They were alcoholics, narcissists. And then I had a racist stepdad, so it was one of those, I had an identity issue, but I had to act a certain way. So the good thing is I learned, how to be able to talk to my audience and what kind of language to use with certain people. And then it was, really trying to figure out about me. But really how everything got started was I had some traumatic events even when I went to the military to change my life and get away from it. And it was one of those things that, like, no matter what I did, no matter how much I accomplished, all these things were just popping up in my life. So I get married, everything starts coming back, it starts messing with me. I start dealing with these traumas, dealing with some of these limiting beliefs, getting upset with people. And it was one of those where it's like, well, maybe I was accustomed to things or thinking negatively, where that was just the way that things were perceived to me, or I'm the crazy one. So for me, it was really going through those things. I became drinking a lot. I was a big drinker. That was part of the identity, is when I drink. I'm the coolest guy in the room and everybody loves me. But it was one of those where it's like I'm drinking for approval, not necessarily for
Hmm.
me. And it wasn't something that I can just have one or two. So for me, that's where the real work started happening. I ended up getting out the military. And what was funny is in the military, I was my own boss at 19. So when I got out the military and I'm working at a mortgage brokerage, and there's a lot of other 22-year-olds with me, we had different mindsets. In their case, they're in the party mentality. They just came off their mom and daddy's couch. And then it's me, 22 years old, married, starting a family, three dogs. And I'm like, yeah, I get up early in the morning to go to the gym. I do all these things. And it was just like some of the aspirations didn't add up. So for me, a week before my daughter was born, I started a podcast, The Winner's Paradigm, and that's really where I wanted to dig deep, peel back the layers on these things, and really say, hey, you know, um, we're going to do whatever we have to do to recalibrate our mindset and then align ourselves with our definition of success. So in my case, it really was that, podcasting gave me that to be able to speak my voice. And then I worked my way up with my mentor, Zach Babcock, ended up, creating a partnership and starting a business with him, which I would have thought of, but it was all, just continually putting the work in and trying to figure out, hey, how do I get better? How do I fix some of these things? Not necessarily fix, excuse me, but certain aspects. You fix things or you put the work in on yourself, and you're like, well, this is an ever changing process. I feel good, and then all of a sudden, you realize, hey, well, maybe feeling good was great, but there's something else that we need to figure out first.
Yeah. Wow. Well, it sounds like you've been through a lot, but at the same time, it's kind of shaped you and helped you become like who you are today. Um, you mentioned that you were in the Marines.
Yes.
What was that like? What kind of led you to choosing that path in the first place?
Yes, so I actually come from a long lineage of military. So my great grandfather was a prisoner of war, World War II. So for me, like seeing him, I was young. He's like in his 70s when I was like five. I think he passed away when I was seven. So I was young when I witnessed him and like really dealt with it. And my dad was a Marine, so it was one of those like chip on my shoulder type deals initially, where it was
Yeah.
like I can be a Marine. This is easy. My stepdad was Army, and it was funny is like it was just one of those like I talked to Army guys and just like I don't want to do that. I want to be the best. So for me, going to the military was great. Now, what was funny is they say it's the old school mentality, and that's where they're screaming at you, they're getting in your face, and that. So boot camp a little bit easier on the screaming side, because I was used to it with my parents yelling at me, and I can go through it. But I have two left feet, so I cannot march, I cannot drill, and that's where a lot of my problems arose. Is
Uh,
I can do 30 plus pull ups, but I cannot walk in a straight line. I'm going crooked, so they're getting mad at me. So the military was great in that aspect. For me, I was one of those where they just weeded it out. Oh, you're a leader right out the gate. So it was fun, but to me, I was like, this isn't fun. I'm getting picked on, and it's like, yeah, because they see good things in you. So I became my own boss in 1920, and then it was really just trying to figure things out for myself. I did a deployment then to Kuwait, So it was a different operational tempo. And I'd say that was what was crazy as well is over there, it's mission, mission, mission. So you're supposed to work 12 hours a day. I was working 16 to 18 hours. So it was one of those where it's like, yeah, no matter what, you're working tomorrow. So if you put this 18 hours in, you're still going in tomorrow. So in my case, it was like, I need to get in the gym and I need to do this. And it was a little bit easier to eat healthy because I'm always doing this and running all day and so forth,
Mhm.
So in my case, it was difficult coming home. And it's kind of one of those things. And it's funny, it's like as an entrepreneur, we go through the same things. And it was like going home and then talking to people, and it's like, I can't do this or I don't have time. And I'm like, there's time in a day if you make it happen. Don't tell me there's no time. And I'm like just going a million miles a minute, and I still have to, reel it in and go slower. But it was something that was extremely difficult for me because you come to men, in the military as well. It's like that. You come with a problem, they give you a solution, and it's black and white. And you're like, well, it can't be black and white. No, that's how it is, and that's why it's efficient. Bad thing is yes, you can't put emotion into all of it, but sometimes you need it. So in my case, it was coming back home, and then I was taking that lesson and trying to apply it to life, where it's like you can't talk to people that way. You can't tell them it's black and white, figure it the F out, because they're not going to respond right. So in my
Mm.
case, it was dealing with these things, realizing, hey, you're here, bring it down here, or at least figure out how you're going to be able to do it. So it was one of those where I had to keep working on it, and in my case, it's like I'm the overachiever. I'm always doing more and more and more. So it just drove me crazy because it was like, oh, I can always work, but then the relationships weren't adding up. I wasn't being the man I was supposed to be. Ended up getting married later on, and I was still trying to do the same thing where it was like always doing something, going to college after school. Then it was like, I don't like college, but I said I'm going to do it. So I'm writing this 20-page paper. And then I'm like, not, being there for the wife. So in my case, I had to relearn everything and make it a priority to really dive into some of those things and be like, hey, part of that overachieving in being a workaholic is because of the fear of losing it or the fear of not accomplishing enough.
Yeah, wow. It's like a totally different mentality as well in like the army and the marines, but like I imagine it's very useful as well in your
Absolutely.
day-to-day life. I feel like a lot of us we're prone to making excuses because it's just so easy to stay comfortable and make those excuses. But yeah, it's great to have that sort of mentality where you're like, just do it, no excuses.
Yeah,
Um, yeah,
absolutely.
no, go. Sorry.
No, I was just adding. Yeah, absolutely, and I'd say that's the coolest thing now is being able to teach it and being like, hey, there is excuses. Don't get me wrong. If you're physically unable to do things
Yeah.
and that, but if you can control it, that's where it's like you need to be able to seize that for yourself. It's taking care of your body. It's making sure you go on the walks. You're clearing your mind. You're figuring it out. Back then I was just like, oh, you either get shit done or you don't get it done, and that's kind of the mentality of the military. So it carried and it pushed me further, but it was learning the little aspects with it as well. That way I'm like, hey, I've been there, I've done that. So if you want to
Hmm.
keep working hard or you don't want to put in the work, it's going to show for itself. And then at the same time, like other people are going to see clearly what's going on with you. So you're able to like, use that perspective for people.
Yeah. So when you were in the military, did you get injured, which was why you had to leave, or?
Good question. Yes. Uh, so year two, I tore all the cartilage in my right knee, and from
Oh.
there, that's where it was a battle. So I was on a promotion board. I was supposed to get promoted, and I was happy because I was only in 2 years. I was going to be enlisted rank 4, and it was going to boost my career or enlisted rank 5. Excuse me. I was already at 4. So it was one of those where it was going to boost me up into this category, and I was on the top of the world because it was like, hey, I'm an E6 position as an E4. So I had it in my head. I'm my own boss. I don't need anything. And then it was like getting injured, getting that ripped away. And it was like, hey, you're no longer this. You're this. You're not as good as a Marine because you're injured. So I battled for a year, going to physical therapy for a year and a half. A year it took to be able to get the arthroscopic surgery. Well, you actually tore some cartilage. And then from there, it was getting 5 injections, I believe. So I got 5 injections in my knee, which I didn't really want, just because with some of the cortisone and steroid shots you get, it just numbs your knee and it'll numb, or excuse me, numb whatever location it is, and basically allows you, to continue working on it. But the long term effects is worse because now you're just suppressing the issue versus actually going in there and fixing it. So in my case, it was, not really having success with that. And then I whittled it down to my last 3 weeks in the military. And that's where it was, playing the little games that they play. And it was, going to medical and medical. I'm like, hey, I need a medical extension. Oh, you're going to go to admin. I'm like, admin doesn't give medical extensions. Hence, that's why it's called medical. Go to admin. Oh, we can give you an admin extension, but you're going to have to do 3 physical fitness tests because you missed them. And I'm like, yeah, I haven't ran in the Marine Corps. It's 3 miles. So I was like, I haven't ran 3 miles in 2 years. There's no way I'm going to be able to run six. And then a combat fitness test was just like another, all these maneuvers, and it's difficult. It's real strenuous on the body. So I was like, there's no way that I'm going to be able to do that with this knee. And it was one of those where it's like, oh, you either figure it out, or you could either lie and say, hey, you're good. And then later on, when I go to be on limited duty again and take that time to heal for my knee, they can be able to process me out the military and say, hey, he was faking it or whatever. So in my case, I kind of had the ups and downs. And from there, I was like, I never want to put my life in somebody else's hands. So I was
Yeah.
like, I'm going to move on, with life. And that's what kind of made me, have that mindset flip. And it was, all right, I wanted to stay in for 20. I cannot stay in for 20 years. This is what I'm going to have to do with life and figure it out.
Wow. So you had initially planned to like have a full on career like for your whole or majority of your life in the Marines, and then it just kind of got ripped away from you. That's tough.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it absolutely was. And the ego, everything, initially was tough. And then really reintegrating. So I did home improvement sales first, which was straight commission. So it was good, 1 month, $7,000, and then 2 months, nothing. And it was one of those with the company where it was like they didn't update their price book, they didn't really communicate. So I'm making deals, and then it's fix this deal, and I'm like, this is going, it's chaotic, it's going crazy. And then it was going to the mortgage brokerage, and it was like another one, like, am I the crazy one again? Because again, I grew up with narcissists, but when I started to be around 22-year-olds that had, different depiction on life and what they wanted, it was something where I'm like, I know I'm not crazy. It's just they're at a different point at their life than I am. And I was like, so it's not that there's something wrong with me. It's just like, I don't find, partying all the time to be the best use of my time versus, going to the gym, taking care of my body, reading, putting the work in because I knew there's somewhere I want to be. So it really was trying to figure out, what it is, and then eventually gravitating to the right room, to where it was like, I have great people around me. This is exactly where I want to be. And it was one of those, finally for the first time, you can be able to talk about things or talk about, hey, this and that, get some help you need without having like that judgment from anyone or any person, really just honing in and trying to see, what kind of knowledge it is. It's like everybody's been there, and it's a place of genuine, help that they want to do for you.
Hmm. Yeah. So I feel like being in the army and the Marines, that like must have forced you to grow up quite quickly mentally. So when you had returns and like life afterwards, was that did growing up quicker kind of make that harder to reintegrate back into society and like find other people with similar viewpoints and
Oh,
attitudes?
that's a good question. So yes and no. I'm gonna say yes because with my parents, like I said, they were 1921 when they had me, so I had to grow up pretty quick with them. When I was about 5 years old, they treated me like an adult, and it wasn't necessarily like the act on your own, be independent, but it was just some of the ways that they would talk to me and so forth. They expected me to act was older, so I always kind of had that chip on my shoulder. All my friends were older than me because it was one of those deals where it was like I got along with the older kids more because I can be somewhat more mature. Besides in the classroom, I'd be the class clown, but outside of school, it'd be like the older kids because I was, holding myself to be more mature. So, yes, it did help a bit just because I was the leader in there. So it was like at no point in time, I was able to just be the one just running around, acting, young, being like, I didn't know any better. Like anytime I got in trouble, you know exactly what you did. So it was one of those from an accountability standpoint, like you mess up, yes, I did it, move on, and it was
Mm.
something where it was like you needed to do, as in, realizing I needed to be around the right people. I just was fortunate. I went in a Facebook group and I put in there to one of the guys, Zach Babcock, and I was like, hey, you're an honor. He actually got out of prison. He flipped his life around and started a 6-figure podcasting business, and really took off on his podcasting journey and really started healing himself. So I commented in there and I'm like, hey, brother, I really appreciate you and everything you're doing. And then one of his guys from his team, which is one of my good friends now, he messaged me and he was like, "Hey, I'm an army officer. I just got out. I can definitely help you if you need anything." So from there, it was awesome because I had that community. And then he dropped a course, $47 to be able to build your own podcast. So I went over there, I bought the course, I joined his monthly group, and it was something where it was like, you know what, I need to be on this call because when I wanted to start a podcast and really start diving into these issues and like sharing the information with people, my friends, my old friends, that are like stuck in that little box or whatever the reason is. They're at that point in life. They were like, podcasting is stupid. Why would you want to do that? So it was different, getting in that right room because I was like anticipating these answers, and I was protecting myself. And it was like, okay, you want to start a podcast? Why? Oh, what are we talking about? And then we start talking about things, and they're like, you know what? That's actually a really good point. You actually been through a lot. Do you give yourself some grace for what you actually went through and how you persevere? And I'm like, what are you talking about? No one's ever talked to me like this. So it was one of those two where it led me into that. And then even um, not too in July, he had an event out in St. Louis, and I went out there, and it was awesome as well because it was like knowing people on Facebook's cool, but meeting them in person is crazier. So for me, it was like
Mm.
the whole meet people on the internet thing as a kid you hear, and then it was like meeting these people, and I didn't even know them. They're like, hey man, I really want to know you on a personal level. So it was talking, and then it was really like, hey, if you ever need anything, and it was like six different people that like I felt like I connected with them my whole life, and I just met them, with probably knew them within a year. But it was one of those where it's like we built that relationship, and it was something where I go through that where it's like it's hard to trust people, and you don't really know, and then you get around the right people, and it's like completely different because initially you're thrown off, and then it's awesome because you start looking at it, you're like, you know what, they actually care about you. They want to help you. They ask about, oh, you're married. How's your marriage? How is it with a little one and try to juggle the business, and how do you find time for yourself, and getting all these little tips that like they wish they either could have had or what they believe, what can help me as well.
Wow, it's so great to have a group of people that support you in that way. How do you deal or cope with the other side of things, with rejection, with like trauma from your injury, that sort of side of things, family issues? How do you deal with those kind of problems?
Good question. So what I would say from there is first you gotta figure out for yourself, what works for you. What kind of things. Like for me, I went to therapy. I didn't feel like it worked then, just because the action plans that they give me and some of the strategies. It's like they would say like download the breathwork app instead of saying like, hey, here's some breathwork exercises. Have you ever heard of box breathing? And then start doing it for an example. So if it would have maybe been that, and I could have been with that person, it could have been a completely different experience. Versus them being like, all right, it sounds like all your stress and irritation and depression, anxieties coming from the military. So once you're out of the military, you're just not going to be depressed no more. And in theory, yeah, that makes sense. But I was still a little depressed because now it's a little bit of a different world for me outside the military. So it was something funny like that. So in my case, it was really like figuring out what worked for me, and it was writing down your core values and saying, hey, am I living up to these things? And for me, I made my core values actionable steps. So it was something where I was like, I'm going to take these things every single day, and I'm going to look myself in the mirror, and I'm going to be like, hey, do you look good physically? Do you feel good? Do um, and kind of from there gauge it to where I can't look myself in the mirror. How am I going to journal on here and talk about my feelings? And if I need to cry it out. And how am I going to be transparent, hold myself accountable, and talk to you if I can't even be transparent with myself? Or if you ask me a question and I'm like, and I go around it, then you're going to be able to realize that. So it was really figuring out those elements and then being like, hey, my fifth core value, it's going to be learning and application. I need to be able to learn these things, read the book, take one thing and extract that knowledge, and then figure out for me. So in my case, it was really diving into the core values aspect, which led me back to meditation. And it was like for the first time in years, I can finally sit in a room by myself, be able to think, and I prefer to be by myself. That way, I can be able to channel whatever, and if I have those emotions, process it, write it down, and then be able to be like, all right, how do I do better, or what kind of knowledge do I need? Do I need to ask someone, or do I need to go to my friend that helps me out with breath work? And he's my coach in that aspect. So it gives me those kind of tools to be able to build on it. And I know with life, these things are always coming. So it's not something you're just going to get there to and be accomplished. It's something you always have to work at. So in my case, the breath work, I'm like, I'm trying all the time because something small could trigger me, or OCD. And I'm like, things are not going according to plan, or uh, I need to get all these things done in a day and I don't have enough time. And it's like you waste time hyperventilating and thinking about it than actually doing it. So in my case, it's finding those ways to constructively pass it. Working out's another good one that I release a lot of stress from, and it's one of those. It's like I literally have anxiety or get upset at myself if I do not go and get a workout in. So it's a good thing is I like force myself to do it even when I don't feel good, and even with the injuries, my body feels terrible. So like we were talking about, I get up at 3 a.m. to go work out, and if I can't do that, then I take care of my body the whole entire day. That way, when it's 9 p.m. at night, I can go instead, and then I'm still able to accomplish it. It's just taking care of the process before I can get to it.
Yeah, working out makes such a big difference to your mental health. I know myself, if I like don't work out, it's just I can feel my head getting foggier and foggier, and my like mentality for everything just gets more negative. Like it makes such a huge difference, and
Absolutely.
I think people that don't work out probably don't realize how big a difference it makes. Um, the breath work, what's that like? What's it supposed to do? Because I've never really done it before, but it sounds. Do you do it alongside meditation or?
Yes, so you can, or you can do it by itself. So breath work, there's different phases. So what the box breathing was, like I was saying, is it's a count of four. So you would breathe in 4 seconds, you would release for 4 seconds, or excuse me, breathe in for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, release for 4 seconds, and then you're going to hold your breath for 4 seconds. And then it's just a pattern of doing it. That's why it's like a box. You're doing fours. And then, for instance, I just did one on Friday, which was open mouth breathing, and that was 40 minutes, and that was brutal because it
Wow,
was
it's
one
a
of
long
those where it's like
time.
you're laying down and and you take these big breaths, and then you slow down, and it was one of those deals where it's like you don't realize it until like your body, and then your arms start going numb a little bit because all you're doing is you're focusing on that. But the good thing is you're channeling all those thoughts, you're relaxing, you're letting things come to you. So in my case, using one of those things, and I don't want to jump too much into what kind of techniques because there's so different many. And in my case, it's like I've been doing it for the past 6 months, but it's one of those that I'm still working on it and getting better at. And hey, doing these things. But I'd say from their perspective, yes, gives you that time to be able to channel it, focus on that. It activates your what is it, the paranervous system, so you're able to in your body, feel different. And then it's one of those things where it's like you can just do breath work, for however long, 10 minutes, or some people do longer, and then it allows you to just really be at a different place kind of like after a workout where it's a little bit euphoric sometimes and you're just like I feel great, but in this case you might feel great, you might feel like, ooh, I feel something over me, and then from there you can jot down, and really that's what I like to do is just start journaling it and be like, how do I feel this way, how do I feel about this, oh, that problem I was talking about, how am I going to be able to work on it, what are some things I need to do, how am I going to be able to solve this problem, and how am I going to react to negativity. Someone comes at to me with a negative attitude today, what am I going to do? So it's that way. It's like you do the affirmations part, and then you're really just working on yourself and be like, hey, this is what I can do. I appreciate you. I appreciate myself for everything that I've been through and done. Now I can be able to be the best, dad, husband, friend. I can be business owner, and it's like you can actually help people on that personal level once you start figuring it out a little more for yourself and being self-aware.
Is that something that you try and do every day, like as part of a morning routine?
Absolutely. So, as we talked about morning routines earlier, that one's extremely tough for me. And it's one of those, and that's why I just tell it how it is. Um, like I said, I got joint problems from my hips, elbows, knees, shoulders. What else? Yeah. So it's one of those where it's like my body feels terrible every day. Even like today, I went up and got a workout in, and my elbows right now are killing me while we're speaking. So it's one of those where it's like, it's something that I'm like, hey, I either get done early in the morning or either get done at night. right? And if it's at nighttime, I take care of myself. I have ointments, topicals I put on, and take care of my body. But if not, that's where I'm really looking into it. So as in the morning routine, I just put that into, hey, this is what number A is, waking up at 3 a.m., getting these things in. This is what number B is, getting the workout in late. And then two, it's like you'll read the 10 pages a day. Um, and from there, I'm like missing something. Oh, my non-negotiables. That's exactly what it was because I was going to talk about that. So yeah, I just made it into non-negotiable things. And I'm like, hey, regardless of what time it is, whether it's in the morning, whether it's at night, I will meditate. I will do some breath work once a day, and then I'm going to read at least one page. I don't say 10 anymore, just because there is days where I do so much work. I talk to so many people. I don't even want to look at my phone anymore. I don't want to do anything. So I'm like, you know what? That's where I'm going to go sit outside and just breathe for a little bit. And really, you can jump into breath work, but I'd say like how that all started, is me just going outside and just looking at stars and just like, all right, thinking, now it's able to do it more progressive. But it was one of those where it's like, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do ab workouts every night or once a day because I say that's not what I want to do. And I skip on that all the time. So it's having those non-negotiable things that allow you to kind of counteract or even align that morning routine with a non-negotiable. So you're like, all right, regardless, these things get done, whether if you can accomplish it in the morning. And I know like in any other case, yeah, I would say 100%. I need to have it well established in that. But in my case, it's like giving them myself the grace where I'm like, yeah, I can't always do that. I got to deal with my body. I got to deal with the little one. She may get up at 4 o'clock in the morning one day, and then all of a sudden that throws me off because then I'm like, oh, I got to come back from the gym early, or I got to be able to miss it, and that's okay. So you got to just figure out, hey, what could you do, and then in the event of something not going well, what's your corrective action to be like, hey, I got this thing, or even in the morning, maybe I drink a cup of coffee and then I write some things down, or try to get myself organized, or clear my thoughts before the day goes.
And how long have you been doing like that sort of morning routine?
So that's probably been about close to a year now. It's been about 10 months that I've been doing that morning routine. Um, in with that was I got a new house, and then from there we had I was working at a company that was based out of Texas, so it was 2 hours earlier. So I was waking up at 4 a.m. to go to the gym, and then at 6 a.m. Was when I would start that job. So it was one of those deals where it was like I needed to figure out something, but it was so early, even waking up at 5:30 and then going to the job, that I would be, brain frog and just tired all morning if I just went into it trying to make phone calls without, actually decompressing in the morning and being stuck on something that keeps me alert. That way I'm good to go.
Mm-hmm. And have you found that like that's really improved your life having this sort of routine? Because does it kind of like really set you up for the day?
Yeah, I absolutely would say it does set you up for the day. You feel more alert, definitely no brain fog. And from there, the thoughts come a lot easier. It's one of those where I'm not like extremely tired and then trying to figure out, hey, what's going on and what am I going to do? In my case, it's like, hey, a little bit easier. And even now, don't get me wrong, I'm working on it. But for instance, like this month, extremely difficult for me because I'm taking my last college class. And it's one of those where it's like, insane amount of work. So now I'm not sleeping as much. So what I'll do is I'll go to the gym at 3, get back by 5, and then the little one doesn't get up till 6:15. So I might catch like a 20-30 minute nap. And that way I'm able to be good for a couple hours. Or what you can do is you can drink coffee and then go to sleep for 25 minutes. And what happens is it fills in for the serotonin levels. And then from there, you feel wide awake when you wake up. I seen a video on it and I tried it and I'm like, oh, this is working really good. So from there, keeps you alert, and then you'll be good to go. And then I'll probably take like a second nap during the day, and it's 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour maybe, to be able to be fresh because I know I'm going to stay up late. So I know it's not the best right now, but it's one of those where it's like, hey, you got to control your situation and figure out what it is. I could easily say, oh, I can't go to the gym. I can't get these things done, but it's like, no, I got this work I need to get done. I got this baby I need to take care of. I got work I need to do, and finding what the best thing is for it.
Yeah, you sound like you have a lot to juggle and balance. Like myself, like I just have me basically, and I have my boyfriend, but I don't have a baby or anything to look after. Like, how do you um, plan your time? How do you find that is to find the balance between your work life and then like your personal life?
Uh-huh. So what I would say for that, and when I first started working with my partner, he recommended a book, and it's called The One Thing by Gary Keller, and it's one of
Okay.
those where there people would say, be intentional with your time and block off one thing. And it's one of those where people are like, oh, this is something I already know, but it's not. It's one of those people say that they do know, but they don't apply it. So it's really being intentional with your time. I would
Mm-hmm.
say, like, what I would like to do, and what I do every day is I'll put like time blocks. So I'll just be specific there. So, like, this hour, for instance, is us recording the podcast. And then I'm going to take 30 minutes after this and I'm going to go hang out with the baby, make her a bottle, and relax. Then, 30 minutes later, if this were a weekday, then what I'm going to do from there 30 minutes later is I'm going to, work on looking through my emails. And then it's going to go specific to where it's that. And what I would
Mm-hmm.
say the biggest thing is for me is don't work on something that's taking you too long. Just figure out time to put it in the schedule, later on. Because if you wait today, and let's say we waste 6 hours working on something versus you actually, being like, all right, I'm done for the day. I'm going to move on to the next task. That then it helps you out a little bit more. Because I found out in my life, I was like, oh, I'm doing this paper, I'm doing everything now, and then it's not allowing me to be able to, get other things done because I'm working on the one thing that I'm like, oh, freaking out about that I totally just forget about something or don't put enough effort towards it.
Mm-hmm. When you're time blocking, do you find it helps to keep things like quite divided up? So one day you'll time block and focus your attention to maybe studying, and then the next day maybe you'll focus your attention towards work, or do you kind of mix them up a bit?
Good question. Yeah, so I do that. I tried to. So, like, for instance, we started a podcast booking service, and it was one of those where it's like I wanted every single day to work on every single client, and it got strategic where it's like I can't, work on every single client and give them 2 hours. It's just way too much time, way too much that needs to go into that. So, what I might do is make it more feasible and be like, all right, I'm gonna get them, send out 10 different messages, get them booked on podcasts, 10 different messages to get them booked on other podcasts or even connect to people on Facebook during this time, or add
Mm-hmm.
X, Y, and Z amount of people on Facebook during this time so I can add to my network. And it's one of those where it's like when I made it smaller, more achievable goals, I was able to do it faster versus being like, oh, I'm going to give myself this long extended period of time. That's going to make this, different for me.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Um, all right. Well, talk to me a little bit about your podcast, The Winner's Paradigm. Like, what's it? What does it mean to you?
Absolutely. So the winner's paradigm is really, figuring out, hey, what is the one thing we need to do to figure out how to win, whether it's the mindset thing and dialing it back. And maybe you came from a good part, you just didn't experience any other things. So you needed to, learn how to be able to overcome adversity or how to be able to make sure you find time to get things done. Because it's one of those where before we may have not had the responsibilities and then now we got a ton. So you figure out from there, hey, what's the best thing you're going to do? Then you execute. So winner's paradigm is all about figuring that out. What I like to do is just really peel back those layers and get to know people on a personal level and say, hey, this is what's happening. This is what I'm getting done. This is how I was able to do it. And then really have those conversations detailed so people can be able to be like, all right, you went here. This is how you did it. It's coming from a place of vulnerability, not, being bragging or anything of that nature.
Mm-hmm. Okay, nice. Um, how have you found it starting a business, and kind of do you rely on your business ventures as like your sole income, or is it like a part-time thing? Do you have another job?
Good question. So no, I went all in on the business. Good thing is we have a couple clients, and that's allowed me to be able to reel back into it. And then of course, figuring out whatever else side hustles that work. So in my case, it's going on Podmatch and being a pro member. And if you for every interview you do on the pros, that they will actually give you money back as well. So it's like figuring out ways to optimize that and really
Mm-hmm.
trying to figure it. I felt like when I was working a job and I was trying to figure out, the money aspect and going down that route, I was stressing out more than actually getting things done.
Yeah, yeah, being like proactive about it. Some
Absolutely.
people, some people they prefer the security that a job provides, and security is obviously great. But like I know myself, like I really like the idea of being in control of like my future and where I can go with it. I imagine you're the same with what you're doing as well.
Oh, a
Uh,
100%.
yeah, yeah. Sorry, I keep going like and then. Um, so, what sort of challenges um, have you had when starting the business and the podcast?
So I'd say you definitely will get the people who don't understand why you're doing it.
Yeah.
And it's one of those, just, double down on what you're good at and what you're doing and be like, hey, there's a reason why I'm doing this and there's a reason why people are where they are in life. So it's kind of like you already acknowledging what the scenario is, you're just executing. I found that, it was extremely difficult when you're trying to juggle things or your heart's not in it. So just make sure that, if you are doing it, it's what you want to do. If not, you're going to spend a lot of hours. You may take more time that you need to on things. You may not be able to decompress or do that. And then I'd also say separate, work from your personal life and just really
Hmm.
relax. Because often, I found that I was like overworking again or trying to do too much where it's like I couldn't even calm down for the family and I was on my phone the whole time.
Yeah. How do you kind of make yourself slow down and step back from work? Do you just
Exactly.
do you like put your phone in another room or try and get outside or?
Yeah, so what I like to do is put my phone like on airplane mode if we're gonna go do something, and that way, I'm fully in on it. Or what I'll do is just keep telling myself like, you're not gonna take your phone out, and even if I do, I'm
Hmm.
like, oh, just put it away. So it's one of those that it's like I'm not focused on those things, and then yeah, you take the hat off essentially. You go walk outside, you get some fresh breath of air. You figure out, hey, let's do this or whatever you need to that's going to be able to let you decompress, because I found like a lot of times, I was going back in the conversations and I'm talking about work and going crazy about it, that I like didn't stop talking about it, and it was one of those where it's like, all right, I'm still in that mode. I'm eating and I'm like, oh, I can do this for tomorrow and I can talk about this in this
Hmm.
meeting, and it was like, yeah, I totally wasn't able to be present in the moment, and that's something I'm still working on.
Yeah, it's quite hard to be present and like because you're essentially having to control your thoughts, but like your thoughts don't want to be controlled. uh,
100% agree.
um, so, in business, have you like had any major failures or anything like that? And what have you learned from them, and how have you kind of learned from them?
Yeah, so I would say the biggest one for me was alignment, not being in the right
Hmm.
place that I needed to be in. And it was one of those, working at jobs where just the core value standpoint didn't sit well with me. They're either talking about money, and it was from an aspect of um, where I just didn't agree, and it was one of those where it was the company or even my last job. We had a nanny. She was taking care of my daughter, and then she was doing it every other day. We couldn't afford the whole month. It was just going to spread us too thin on finances, $2,800 a month. So we're like, yeah, we're not going to do that. And it was one of those where I'm like, hey, the nanny moved to Minnesota. I'm holding the baby, making sales calls. The job didn't really understand. They were like, oh, is your heart still in it? So it was one of those where it's like, I don't want to be here. And I'd say that's the biggest thing
Mm.
a lot of people deal with is just settling for less and be like, hey, whatever, things will work itself out. In my case, it was not wanting to do those things where I couldn't just be able to let people know, hey, this is what I need to do. This is why I need to do it. It was really like getting in my own head and preventing myself before anything happened.
Yeah. Okay. Um, do you find that your mindset from being in the Marines and to like now, do you think that's changed a lot?
I think it absolutely did, and it has to. If you want to get to a different place, and you want to be able to evolve, you have to be able to do that. I'd say back then, early on in the military, it was like I was accomplishing a lot, so I thought highly of myself, and
Hmm.
it was one of those where it's like I needed to still battle challenges. versus getting out and realizing like and being humbled like, all right, the civilian world, the world outside the military doesn't really care. You can
Mm-hmm.
say all the things you did, but if it's not degrees, if it's not actual facts that you can prove, it's going to be different to get a job. If you don't have the history. So it was like really looking that aspect, and then at the same time not caring anymore. And it was like I, used to perform and wanted to do that, figuring out for yourself, like I perform for myself instead of whoever else.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that if people want to improve their mindset, they have to have the right values? So, um, valuing learning stuff, for example, over, I don't know, valuing something that's not very productive, I guess.
So I would add on to that. I heard in a podcast
Mm-hmm.
that when you're aligned to what you're passionate about, that's where you start wanting to focus more on that than doing the entertainment features and that. And I 100% agree on that. I feel like that's what I'm doing. If it's not the business, if it's not hanging out with family, it's reading books.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those things where like people will be like, "Hey, do you watch Netflix?" And I'm like, "Not really." Or like, well, I watched Stranger Things, and my wife watched an episode, and like I thought it was good. And they're like, "Did you watch the second episode? You just want to sleep?" I'm like, "Yeah." And they're like, "What?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah." Like, and it's kind of like that. Like I stopped playing video games. Now I play like maybe 4 times a month,
Yeah.
and not all day like I used to. So it's one of those where it's like talking to people, and I'm like, nah, I don't play that. Like I just don't. It's there's really not enough time for me to, and it's even one like I did on Friday night, for instance. I wanted to test it, so I was like, I'm gonna stay up till 11, and then at 11 until 11:30 because we have a new Doberman, and the Doberman kept barking and going crazy, so I had to take it outside. So we went outside. It was like 11:30, and I look, it's midnight. So I slept for 3 hours, and then I woke up and I took a bunch of pre-workout. I'm like, I'm going to the gym. So I went to the gym, and I was just like, all right, that probably wasn't the smartest decision, but I wanted to prove it to myself that I can do it. And it was really like testing the willpower, testing if I
Mm-hmm.
really wanted to get up, still put the work in, even though I knew I was tired. I didn't want to do it. In my case, excelled. But those are just
Mm-hmm.
some of the things, it's like when you're more aligned to what you're passionate about, those things happen. You're kind of able to focus on it. Yeah, so I
That's
would
why.
say what the biggest thing is trying to figure out what works for you, and
Mm-hmm.
how you're going to be able to make it happen. So, like I said, I don't want to go drink because it's just not going to bring me good things.
Yeah.
And it's like, it depends if it's social, it's a networking event. Yeah, 100% okay. But to be out all night and then wake up early, then it ruins the next day. Or even, if you're
Yes.
hungover and it's like you got to clean the house, now you don't want to clean the house. Now your house is dirty for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And it's like, but you could have easily done it, or you could have easily been able to read more and then be able to talk more, or have something like have some questions to go ask, versus like the new week and you're not really knowing what you're set up for.
Yeah. It's you're making sacrifices now for like that long-term reward. I
Absolutely.
um I myself, like I've been trying not to watch Netflix, cutting down social media, because it just sucks your time. And like there's like you could spend half an hour like scrolling on something, and then you've just wasted half an hour, and you could have learned something or done something to make your tomorrow better. And I'm really trying to become more disciplined with that sort of stuff. How do you maintain discipline? Because I feel like you're very disciplined.
And I think it just starts with figuring out. So, and you got to look at your time. So for me, yes, discipline to an extent. Problem is, yeah, I'm the one that be watching fitness videos on TikTok and meal plans, and then it's like 3 hours later. So I got to be like, all right, but at the same time, like I wouldn't mind spending 3 hours looking on meal plans and workouts, because it's like that's going to help me. Or
Yeah.
maybe it's like listening to a professional speaker and Tony Robbins or something, and he's going
Mm-hmm.
in about something, and you're like, I don't know why this is intriguing me, but I just want to listen to more. So it's like really being intentional with it. But I'd say as well as just, and I don't want to say stay consistent, but just take them one day at a time. Like, I'm going to do this today. This is what I want to take in. So sometimes you'll take in more than not, but really just focusing on, hey, who you are, why you do what you do, and what attracts you. What are you trying to attract? So in my case, it's like I'm trying to be here. I'm trying to be a 6-figure, 7-figure entrepreneur. How do I get there? I got to watch the ones that are doing that currently and then replicate it, learn off those steps in that. So I'm going to put all this time into it, put all this time into to studying, to watching these videos, because it's going to allow me to get there.
Hmm. Do you do a lot of goal setting to help kind of steer you in the right direction?
Absolutely. So you would do it like you do your business. You'd have your daily, weekly. You can have monthly. I don't have monthly anymore just because I have the weeklies. And then what I'll do is be like, hey, this is all I need to do within the week. So that way, if I don't get certain things done, I can put it to next week or be able to project it further. And then
Hmm.
I'll have my 3 month, 6 month, year, and be able to look at that. And then even my 10-year plan, it was one of those where the other day I had to redo it. And I got asked that question, where do you see yourself in 5 years? I'm like, I hate that question because I didn't think I would have a business until I was in my 30s. Now I have a business. So it's like, what am I going to do with even the 10-year plan? So I got in a little bit of work, and then that night, slept on it. I was like, oh, I know exactly what I want to do in 10 years. So it gave me, some perspective to where I can work through those things.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think it's good to um, like continuously monitor your goals because I feel like you said, you didn't know you were gonna be having a business or anything. You thought that would be in like 10 years or something. Like things are constantly changing, so it's so important to be able to adapt your plans so that you can make sure that you're going in the right direction.
Hmm.
What do you think the winner's paradigm has taught you? Like, what's the best thing that it's taught you?
I would say that you're more similar with people than you think. And the
Mm-hmm.
reason why I thought about that, it was one of those where it's like, what kind of direction could we go? And I'd say like even people that are millionaires, we're closer in mindset to them, or some of the things, or maybe we put the work in, or maybe that, So it's all these things that are similar with us that what they have with them. It's just they do it at an elite level, and they're just like, hey, this is why I do it. This is how I do it, and they're masters of their craft. So in our case, we're on our journey learning, but we can be able to share stories, so we're not the only ones. So that's one aspect. The business aspect, being personal, spiritual, so you can really have these conversations with people, get to know them on a personal level, and then realize like, hey, we have a lot in common. We're actually good friends, or this is why we like each other. And I'd say like that's the coolest part is getting to know people on a personal level, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what I like about the Winners Paradigm podcast is I talk to them on that personal level. It's like at some point it's like I care about your accolades, but I don't. In
Yeah.
the reason why is like I'll say thank you. That's awesome. You've done that. Now I want to know how you did that. I want to know how you think. Now I want to say like, hey, when you're going through this problem, what was kind of your mindset? What was your process? How were you able to get through it? That way we can get those tools if we're there.
Yeah. Wow. No, that's really good. Um, okay, so before we finish, is there anything that I've forgotten to ask that maybe you'd want to cover or let people know about?
Um, No, I can just tie it back to me, and that would be, best way to find me would be go to the winnersparadigm.com or the Winners Paradigm podcast.
Yeah.
And that way you can hear about me. You can learn about Alpha Influence Media, which I'm starting a second podcast on pretty soon. And then also, you can be able to learn how you can align yourself to your ideal guest shows and really provide massive impact and dial in on, hey, what is my purpose and how are we going to be able to connect with others and make things happen for ourselves?
Amazing. Thank you so much. I did remember what I was going to ask. Do you read a lot?
Yes, I do read a lot.
So, can you tell me like three book recommendations maybe you would have for people listening to help inspire them and broaden their minds?
Okay, so we already did the first one, the one thing by Gary Keller.
Yeah,
I'd say How to Win Friends and Influence People. That
I'm
one's a
reading
classic,
that one
but
at the moment.
there you go. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just I even reference it all the time, and it's amazing from that. And then my favorite book, 48 Laws of Power, just because it's like learning the specific laws of power and how they apply to life. And maybe we went through things or we didn't. In my case, it was like having the bad leaders and realizing, like, man, if I just didn't outshine them, then they could have just proved for themselves. So I read that book 2 weeks before I got out the military. And it was funny is I did that. I didn't outshine the leader. And it was one of those things where it's like people clearly seen what was going on, and they were like, "This leader doesn't know what's going on." In my head, I'm like, "I should have read this book sooner."
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for that. It's been really good talking to you. Hey guys, thank you so much for getting to the end of that episode. Hope you enjoyed it. If you want to see more things like that, click here and don't forget to subscribe.